Okay, good morning all from New Zealand. This is Jason ZL2 Foxtrot Tango. Just doing a quick video, really just discussing or letting you know how I got into radio and how the interest started, really. Because I haven't done a video for a little while, so I thought we better do one. Okay, like a lot of people, I started with shortwave radio back in the 80s. But it would have been about 1984, 1985. Had a basic little National Panasonic portable transistor radio. I remember asking my grandfather what SW meant, and he mentioned shortwave, and then mentioned that you can get stations around the world from it, and then I was quite interested straight away as soon as he mentioned listening to stations around the world, and basically, you know, flourished from there. Did that for a number of years when I was at primary school, until I was about 8 or 9. Went to Australia for a little while, and didn't do too much radio in Australia. And then we moved back probably about a year later, back to New Zealand, up in a place called Tauranga. While up there still listening to shortwave, got into CB around about early 1988. Got a basic little 11 channel 2 watt AM only 26 megahertz CB radio, and that was quite neat. There was a jump, a little 6-foot mobile whip on the gutter on the side of the house roof, and could talk all around the Tauranga district and into Mount Maunganui. And as I say, those days the CB channels were still quite busy. And remember listening to the truck drivers and of course listening to Skip when the Skip started running from the South Island, as well as top of the North Island, Auckland and Whangarei, up around the area. So that kind of grabbed me as well. Then eventually moved from Tauranga down to my present QTH of Wanganui in late 1988, and been here since. Again, had the old 12 or 11 channel 2 watt AM CB set. It was called a Pi SS140, made by a company called Pi, P-Y-E, here in New Zealand, and they were probably early 80s vintage. And again, I had that little 6-foot mobile whip on the set of the house roof and could talk all around the Wanganui district. Still listening to shortwave radio and bits and pieces, and started getting into a little bit of 27 meg when I found out what that was about. Heck, the rest of the world's on 27 megs, and did a little bit of listening up there to the American CPS and all the skip coming from stateside in Australia. And it certainly was a lot busier than 26 megs. Eventually I thought it was time to get the ham radio license. I did try studying a little bit in the late 80s up in Tauranga, my ham ticket, but it's certainly a lot more technical in those days. You had to be a lot more, you know your way around electronics a bit more than the multi-choice questions today. So I went to a bit of a class there for a while to learn a bit of basic electronics, but it was well beyond me. I was too busy at school as well, so it was just too much to take on at one go. So I let that slide for a while. Again, still active in CB, around 93, 94, right through the 90s basically. Getting 40 channel sideband sets and chasing skip on single sideband as well on 26 megs. And of course things started to die off with the sunset cycle dropping down, and less people on CB these days, so I thought it's time to go up to ham radio or amateur radio. And I think it was year 2000 I went and studied up. It's at my what they call the limited call in those days. So that was just a multi-choice questionnaire, and that gave me privileges on 6 meters and up, so I had the VHF and the UHF and SHF bands to play with. So we got onto 2 meters and the 70 centimeter band here on the ham bands in 2000. And of course my main passion, like a lot of people, is HF and DXing around the world. And a year or year and a half later I went for the HF side of it and studied my Morse code. course there was a lot of rumours around then that the Morse code would be dropped as a requirement, but I thought, well, I can't wait, I want to get into it now. So quite eager, I studied the Morse code and got my speed up. And it was only 5 words a minute back then. They dropped it from 12 words a minute down to 5 words a minute. And got it first time. So then I upgraded my call from ZL2WJA to ZL2FT, ZL2 Foxtrot Tango, that I am today. Of course, initially I used just basic dipoles and single sideband. A Kenwood TS50, just the standard 100 watts out of the Kenwood, and that worked quite a bit of DX. Still, there was pretty decent amount of propagation around in 2001, and got on bands like 15 metres and 40 metres and had a ball. And over time I started to look at other modes like digital, and of course now I play with a lot of the digital modes like PSK31, JT65, Whisper, Ross, Opera and SSTV, so there's a few and probably a lot more to play with in the future. So what I enjoy with those modes is you can use basic antennas and low power to work the world, and it's been a blast really the last 4 or 5 years playing with the digital modes. So we got the icon here behind me, the 756 Pro 2, and got a red blaster from West Mountain Radio, the plug and play, the little red one that plugs into the USB, and easy to set up, and the software of course is free to download off the internet. So downloaded like Ham Radio Deluxe, the older version with DM780 digital mode software, DigiPan, FL Digi, JT65HF is free to download on the web. Just a Google search for JT65HF download, and of course Whisper WSPR net software is free as well, and that's neat because beaconing, low powered beacon running 5 watts or less into a basic dipole about 15 feet off the ground, and just seen on the PSK reporter where you've been heard, or at least the Whisper map on the whispernet.org website, WSPRnet.org, and there's a map there that can give you an indication of who's hearing you and how far the distance is, and also how strong in dB they're hearing your signal. So at the moment we're still playing with digital. Propagation's been up and down a bit. I had a bit of fun on 28 megs in the summer. Around about February and March 2012 the band was quite active. At the moment it's mid to late July, and the bands are pretty quiet, pretty subdued on 28 megs. There's a bit on 20 metres in the afternoon, around about 0300 to 0700 UTC on 14 megs. So we play with a bit with that. And again, JT65 is going all day, and you can hear it tick away in the background, as well as PSK31. The signals just keep going, and even 15 metres, 21076 is quite active for JT65. But as I say, started really with shortwave, got into the CB radio in the late 80s, went through the 90s with that, did a lot of DXing on that band. Basic antennas, just verticals. Had an old, what they call a Station Master CB vertical, which is still used today for 10 metres, 12 metres and 30 metres. So if I'm on the band and mention I'm running a Station Master CB vertical, it's the 21 foot whip I've got on the house roof here, and that works quite well, and that's probably about 12 or 13 years old now and still holding up. A good Australian made CB vertical and base antenna. But as I say, we've got plenty more to do. We play a little bit with VHF and UHF as well, like the propagation in summer with the ducting that happens, where you get signals from a lot further away when you get the ducting propagation. So I really enjoy the summertime DX on VHF and UHF. Listen to the marine VHF bands as well as the aircraft VHF bands, and can sometimes hear Christchurch from here and all over the place. And the odd time I heard Australia as well, so that's pretty neat. And the propagation's really strong. But as I say, if you're interested in ham radio or amateur radio, it's certainly well worth getting into. So I've been licensed since 2000, So it's been almost 12 years now, and the years have gone certainly by pretty quickly, so we'll continue to be in the hobby for a lot longer yet. And as I say, there's probably a lot more to play with in the future, the way things are going, the way the developments are going with digital modes especially, and software defined radio that's out there. That looks really interesting as well. Just one step beyond what's happening behind me here with the computer hooked up to the radio. Everything's based in the software defined radio box, so that's going to be a neat leap as well. It's just amazing what those units can do, and what you can do with that equipment now. Anyway, that's just a quick ramble, a quick rundown, give you an idea how I got into radio. Basically been in it since I was about 7 or 8, if not younger. I remember listening to AM radio when I was about 5 or 6 years old, and even pulling apart a radio when I was about 5 years old, just out of curiosity, a little transistor. Getting in there with the screwdriver and tuning it up a little bit. So really it's fascinated me since day one, ever since exposed to it. So it's the old story, when you get bitten by the bug, and if you get bitten by the bug the right way, it certainly lasts. Anyway, we'll say 7-3, all the best from Jason here in Wanganui, New Zealand. And we might catch you on the band sometime. And so I'll try and make some more videos, it's been a little while. So 7-3 from ZL2, Foxtrot Tango, all the best.